Welcome to the future of Israel and the Jewish people. We thank you for returning to our show. We're still continuing with the story of Isaac. If you were not here last week, he was one of the patriarchs. He was the second one, Abraham's son. We talked about the fact that Abraham offered him up on the mountain, and God stopped him. Didn't want him to do that pagan thing, but he did want him to test him, to show him that he did love God and was obedient to God, regardless of how much he loved his son. I would not want to have to be put to that kind of a test, but Abraham passed the test. Thank God. We talked about Abraham's wife passing away, and we talked about his servant going to find a bride for him among his own people, and that he tested the woman by seeing whether or not she would give him a drink and also water his camels, and she did it without being asked to water his camels. He made the proposal to her family, and she accepted it. He gave them very wealthy gifts. Remember, he took 10 camels loaded with wealth and supplies. They were not poor. So we'll go back a little bit to last week's show, and I'll read the text of what happened. So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, along with her nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you increase to 1,000 upon 1,000. And may your offspring prosper the cities of your enemies, possess the cities of your enemies." Then Rebekah and her attendants got ready and mounted the camels and went back with the men. So the servants took Rebekah and left. Now Isaac had come he was coming in from the fields. I mentioned that last week on the show. And he went out to the field one evening to meditate. And as he looked up and he saw the camels approaching, Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and she asked the servant, "Who is that man in the field coming to meet us?" "He is my master," the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered herself. And then the servant told Isaac all that had done. And Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah. Remember, his mother passed away. And he married Rebekah. So she became his wife. And he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So, it's a wonderful story of a servant being obedient, of a father being concerned, and a bride being willing. And that's all what we need to think about. God the Father, concerned about us, His Spirit serving us to be the bride of the Messiah. Now that might be a little strange for some men to accept, but it takes a lot of teaching that we can't get into tonight, or we won't. Now, we said that Abraham was a very old man, and he sees his wife pass away. He sees his son get married, and he is still strong and vigorous and able to have children. Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. But while he was still alive, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. To me, that would be modern Jordan. And Jordan today, believe it or not, are more friendly towards Israel than any of the Arab nations. Abraham lived 175 years. So Isaac actually outlives his father by 5 years. I don't know how much that matters. It just happens to be mathematics. Then Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and full of years, and he was gathered to his people. So that's what they say. Now, when his wife dies, he actually buys a plot of land and buries there, and he is eventually buried there too. His sons Isaac and Ishmael bury him in the cave. So even though Ishmael was sent away and became a very big family, he still came back out of respect and buried his father with his stepbrother. So at this point, there's no hostility, which is good. What else can we talk about when we come to Isaac? Well, the next part of this chapter basically talks about the genealogy of Ishmael. And we know that those are the descendants of the Arab races. Isaac runs into a similar problem that his father did, and that he relocated to another area for need, and he temporarily, I guess you'd say, passed his wife off as his sister so they wouldn't kill him. But God basically didn't like that, and the king found out and said, listen, what if one of my men had taken your so-called sister as his wife? You would have caused us all kinds of troubles. So way back there was a moral issue about wives. You know, we hear a lot of things about people having more wives than they need to. But there was a respect there. And when they send him away, he goes back to places where his father had been and had wells, and the enemies came and kept filling them in out of jealousy, I guess, or competition. And finally, he keeps digging wells and keeps getting water. When God says he's going to prosper you, he's going to prosper you, regardless of the enemy. And eventually the king comes and makes a treaty with him and claims to know nothing about what was happening to the wells. Well, Rebecca wants to have children. And for some reason, she's having a very difficult time. And, you know, a woman can put a lot of pressure on a man when she's not able to conceive. And even if it's only for a few years. You know, my own case, we were about 4.5 years married before Mary was born. And so she starts to get impatient. So we're going to read about Jacob and Esau. And this is found in Genesis 25:19. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. Okay, we talked about that. Okay. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayers, and his wife Rebekah becomes pregnant. the babies were jostling each other within her. And she said, "What is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. Remember, we talked about the quality of this woman. Okay? And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your wombs, and two people. From within you will be separated. One will be strong and the other. And the oldest will serve the youngest." So he's saying you got twins, you know. I had an aunt that had two children, a boy and a girl, and she wanted more children. Her husband was 11 years older than her. He wasn't really interested in fathering any more children. And he said to her, "Well, I wish you have twins." And sure enough, she had twins. So we got to watch what we say sometimes. Well, the Lord answered her. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like hairy garment. So they named him Esau. But this, his brother, came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. Now, if you follow the Bible and people tell you different years, they got scales, they got charts, they got all kinds of things, and you say, well, how do they know this for 4,000 years ago? Well, things like this give them an indication. Remember, we said that he was 40 when he married her. He's 60 now. It's 20 years later. Okay? And it didn't matter in them days. They lived so long. They ate so healthy. They had clean air. I'm sure they drank from fresh water. They didn't have all these chemicals that we have. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, we know we're not supposed to play favorites, but it's so easy to do that sometimes when you look at the characteristics based on the temperament of the child. Things we admire, we're attracted to, even if we don't have them ourselves. So, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of your red stew. I'm famished." That is why he was called Esau. Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright." Now this is very important. This is very important. "Look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is a birthright to me?" Now that's disrespectful, because he would have been the heir. He would have been given a double portion. His responsibility would have been to take care of his father and mother, and it didn't seem to interest him. So Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil soup. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Now, you wonder why it says in the Bible that God loved Jacob, he hated Esau. Well, you know, we might love our children, but we hate some of their behaviors. And it's a shame, because what happens down the line, okay, is going to come back to haunt them, as we say. So what doesn't seem important now, because maybe they were teenagers or young adults, but when they're mature people and they realize where they are in their destiny. It's a whole different story. So he goes out after trading his birthright for a meal. So often, we do that. We'll spend money on quick food, hamburgers, whatever, when maybe we'd have been better off. We bought a bottle of water and bought a good book and sat down and read for lunch hour and fed our soul and our mind rather than just the body. But that's the way things are sometimes, and it's very hard to get people to focus on that. So the brothers go on with life, and the father is getting older. The mother is concerned for Jacob. She was told in prophecy when he was being born that he was going to be the leader. And she wanted him to have the birthright. She wanted him to have the father's blessing. So what happens? Well, as Isaac is getting older, and he is the one who has to pass the blessing on, he knows it's supposed to go by tradition to the older son. So here's what it says in chapter 26 and verse 34. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judah's daughter. What happens is that he gets involved with local people. And this creates a problem for both his mother and father. Because when children marry, sometimes outside their religion, outside their culture, outside, the differences create problems. There's nothing wrong with marrying someone from a different nationality or a different race. But the real issues come sometimes with different religions. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to, but it does most of the time. And so what happens here is that Isaac decides to pass the blessing on to Esau. When Isaac was old and his eyes was so weak that he could no longer see, he called Esau to him, oldest son, and said to him, "My son, here I am," he said. Very interesting. Later on, we find lots of people using this expression. Samuel uses it when God calls him. Okay? Isaac says, "I am now an old man, and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment and your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you the blessing before I die." Now this is wonderful that these old people knew they were going to die and they still were in their right mind. Now Rebekah had listened as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.'" So she eavesdropped, Some things might need to be a private conversation, but it's what you do with what you know that's more important. And you're going to see that, again, we have an anxious woman that's not leaving it up to God, and somehow or another is going to try to intervene. That was the same way Sarah gave Abraham her slave girl when she couldn't wait for God to give her Isaac. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat so that he may give you his blessing before he dies. So the mother schemes up. And in the early part of the Bible especially, we find a lot of the women giving instructions to men that is not the will of God. Okay, we have it with Eve, we have it with Sarah, now we have it with Rebekah. Okay? Jacob says to Rebekah, his mother, but my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I'm smooth-skinned. What if my father touches me? I will appear to be tricking him and will bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing. So he's really more concerned about being caught rather than doing something wrong. Later on, we find Joseph refuses to do something wrong, okay? In a different situation. His mother says to him, my son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me. Now they pick goats rather than lamb because of a different flavor, more wild. They eat a little different, and it probably would appear more like wild game. So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food just the way the father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, his oldest son, while she had in her house, and put them on her youngest son. She also covered his hands with the smooth part and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. Then she handed to him, son Jacob, the tasty food and the bread she had made. He went in to the father and said, my father. Yes, my son, he asked. Who is it? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Please sit up and eat so that my game. So he lies to him so that you may give me your blessings. Isaac answers his son, how did you find it so quickly, my son? The Lord your God gave me success, he says. He doesn't say our God, he doesn't say my God, he says your God. So at this point, I could use a narrative from the Gentile world. You could be part of a denomination, but you're really not a Christian. You belong to a Christian organization, but you're not sold out to Yeshua, okay? And Jacob definitely wasn't sold out to God at this point. Then Isaac said to Jacob, come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son, Esau, or not. Again, at this age, he still had a sharp mind. Jacob went close to his father, Isaac, who touched him and said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. When you lose one part of your body, like your eyesight, your ears become sharper. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "I am," he replied. Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat, so that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him, and he ate, and he brought some wine, and he drank. Be careful when you're eating with people. Make sure their intentions are true. You know, where you can watch all the mafioso movies, and there's always big banquets, but afterwards there's danger. Verse 26, if you're following in your Bible. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the scent of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. My God give you heavenly dew and earthly riches, abundancy of grain and of new wine. May nations serve you and people bow down to you. Be Lord over your brother, and may the son of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from the hunt. Now, Jacob was called a deceiver. And we can have good goals, bad actions. You know, wisdom is knowing the mind of God, and understanding is knowing how to implement it. But obedience is better than sacrifice. So we're going to end up with talking about Jacob next. But Esau comes in, tries to do what he has to, and it's too late. So we'll continue next week on that wonderful, wonderful message of Jacob becoming Israel. Come back next week, same time. If you have a question, reach us on info@thefutureofisrael.org. Have a good day, and shalom, peace beyond all understanding. Amen. See you again. Thank you. So, next time it's going to be Jacob. Have the best of time today.